Hello. Hello. Welcome. Hi, everyone. Just waiting for Deepa to join and for some more folks to join. And while we wait, please go ahead and, drop your name, your location. Hello. Welcome. And if you identify with any of the roles on the social change map. I'm going to let Deepa in. Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing, Catherine?
I'm good. I'm going to get us started. So welcome everyone who's joining us. Welcome to people who are watching this later because we'll save this to our IGTV. This is our last IG Live in the 10 Social Change Roles Explained series. Today we're going to be talking about the role of visionaries. And yeah, it's our last one. Kind of wild. My name is Catherine Foley. I'm with the Building Movement Project, which is a national nonprofit that aims to support and strengthen the nonprofit sector. So we do this in many ways through our place-based work, through our reports and research, through our work via the Detroit People's Platform and Solidarity Is. And if you head to our website right now, you can learn more about those various focus areas and all the different work that we do. Right now, we're running a 4-week series where we're highlighting 4 ways that we build power, community, and connections. So if you go to the website and you sign up for our newsletter, you'll receive those updates straight to your inbox. And like I mentioned, today is the last IG Live that we're doing in this series. We're going to talk about the role of visionaries in the social change ecosystem, and we'll also talk about what we might be doing with the social change map in 2022. So with that, welcome, Deepa. Deepa is the creator of this framework, our director of strategic initiatives, and the director of Solidarity Is.
Too many things. Hi. Hi, Catherine. It's great to be here with you. And I love that we're kind of finishing this series the way that we started, which was in conversation with each other. And also want to thank and give a shout out to more of our BMP colleagues, Katie Hugh and Anna Castro, who are here as well and who do so much to support all of the work that happens through Building Movement Project and Solidarity Is. And welcome again, everyone. So glad to be here with you. And as Catherine said, would love to know what role you are kind of connecting to and resonating with as we not only end this series, but are ending this year, this really hard, challenging year. And what's on your mind when you think about social change movements?
Yeah, thanks, Deepa. And yeah, like you mentioned, we're looking ahead to 2022. And as we were kind of planning out this series, we made a choice to end the year with visionaries. And that was a significant choice. So as we close out the year and look ahead to 2022, and we're going to do a lot of visioning, it would be helpful to know what is the role of a visionary when we're looking at a social change ecosystem.
Thanks, Catherine. So I think, as folks likely know, the social change ecosystem framework has 3 components to it. It's got a component around our values. What do we mean when we use words like solidarity or compassion or freedom? It's also got the 10 roles that we've envisioned in the framework. And as Catherine said, this particular month, we're talking about the visionary role. And then the third component is that we're all connected in an ecosystem, that there is interdependence, that there is a way to hold both accountability as well as collaboration in an ecosystem. And all of this is in service to movements, to campaigns, to causes, to communities that we care about, right? So just wanted to start with that. And the role of the visionary is one that I think is oftentimes tough to embody. I think a lot of us feel, at least I know I feel this way, that you get a bit of that imposter syndrome when you think about stepping into the role of a visionary. But what visionaries do, and what I think about when I think about strengths of visionaries are they're really the people who are able to see that North Star, you know, in the sky. They can see the destination in terms of where is this campaign going, where is this movement going, and not only do they see it, but they can articulate it and express it in a way that's really inspiring and that makes a lot of people join. And then finally, there are people who have the capacity to stay anchored in their vision, even around changing circumstances. As we know, you know, we might have a vision for a particular project or a movement or a campaign, but the circumstances are always changing around us. So visionaries have the capacity to also stay anchored in their vision and make changes and adjustments as needed.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I feel like we often hear people being called visionaries, like, oh, this person is a visionary, a trailblazer, but it's hard to know how to actually get to that point. So I think that's really helpful. For folks who already do a lot of visioning, are there things that they can work on or improve upon?
Yeah, so all of these roles, you know, are ones where we can evolve and get better. And as I think we've mentioned before, this framework is not just for individuals, it's also for organizations and institutions as well. So yes, there's always room to grow. So some of the areas where I'll share some ways for us to improve as visionaries are, you know, again, being really open to new information and feedback. Oftentimes, visionaries can be so strongly anchored in their vision that they refuse to be moved, right? And so the ability to actually take in feedback, even criticism, questions without getting defensive or without getting so anchored in what the vision is that it becomes seen as stubborn. So it's important to actually be able to be open to feedback. Also, the readiness to reach out to different audiences. A lot of times visionaries are very comfortable speaking to the choir, the folks that are already sort of following their lead. So how can visionaries speak to new audiences with their vision and find ways to reach them? Because the same language might not work. And then also visionaries, I think, need support from the rest of the ecosystem. This is where I think the ecosystem idea is so important, because as a visionary, it's one thing if you have like this vision in mind, but in order to make it a reality, right, a lot of visionaries need support. And so oftentimes builders and experimenters are really important colleagues to have if you are a visionary, because as we know, builders are the ones who are really putting together the scaffolding, taking a vision and making it a reality by giving it foundation and, you know, the actual building blocks. And experimenters are the ones who, as we talked about last time, are ready to take a chance and try something out, even if it's outside of the status quo. So it's really good to have the support of those two types of roles as well.
Perfect. Yeah, that's really helpful. And are there any examples of like real life visionaries, either in social change or just, you know, in the world, and who
So
they
many,
were?
right? And I would love to hear from folks who are joining us. I mean, if you're a visionary, let us know, right? Or how you're stepping into that. But yeah, there are many examples. I think you said this earlier, Catherine. Oftentimes we think of visionaries as sort of trailblazers, the spokespersons who are, you know, telling us this is where we're headed. So of course we think about people like, you know, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., right, who I think is someone that many of us think of as a visionary when it comes to racial and economic justice. But there are others as well that I'll quickly point out, and some that maybe we don't know, right? We don't know the names because they might not be famous, etc. So one person that I think a lot of us have been leaning on is Mariam Kaba, who, you know, has given us, I think, a vision that is really, really important around abolition. And I actually just wanted to read something from Mariam's book, We Do This Till We Free Us, where Mariam talks about how abolition is a political vision, and says, let's begin our abolitionist journey with the question, what can we imagine for ourselves in the world? And then goes on to paint a vision for what that could look like, right? So that ability to imagine beyond what our reality is the trait of a visionary. And then Mariam Kaba goes on to say, the vision is a restructured society where we have everything we need: food, shelter, education, health, art, beauty, clean water, and more things that are foundational to our personal and community safety. So I think that's an example of someone who is not just talking about, some concept or idea that's like out there, but is also able to paint a vision for what it could be. So I think that's also a trait that many visionaries have. They're not just saying words and concepts, they're actually painting a picture of what our society could look like, our community, our neighborhood could look like if that vision were to be accomplished. And I'd also just say that, I also think that oftentimes we think of visionaries as people who are older, have been doing work for a long time, but I don't think that's true. I think there are a lot of visionaries among folks who are younger when it comes to age. I think about many of the young people in the climate justice movement, for example, or the queer and trans movement, who are younger, but who have really clear visions of what society could look like and should look like, and give us hope at a time when things are really hopeless and dire. Visionaries are people who actually give us the hope of something better.
I really appreciate that. And I appreciate that you're identifying younger, maybe not as well-known people, because I feel like we mentioned, people are deemed visionaries like kind of at the end of their life once they're gone, once they achieve a certain level of notoriety. So I think it really speaks to the fact that you can be visionary in a small ecosystem,
Yes.
like just your friends or your family. So that's really helpful.
Yeah, I love the way you said that. Yeah, I think that it's really important to recognize that we don't have to wait until, much later in our own lives to step into the role. But as I said, I think it's a tough role to step into. And I see people when I do trainings and workshops, that visionary is one of the roles that doesn't often get picked by folks who are engaged in social change work. I see organizations oftentimes stating that they're visionaries because they see that in a network or a coalition that they're part of, they can sort of identify their demands or say, we're looking to make sure that, taxi drivers have their rights and are able to have livelihoods, right? So organizations sometimes, I think, step into a visionary role in an easier way than individuals do.
Mm. And what are some reflections that people can keep in mind if they want to step into the role, or if they're thinking about others in their ecosystem who are visionaries?
Yeah. So I think one is, if you're kind of with all of the roles in the ecosystem framework, I often say that sometimes we're pulled or tugged towards some of them, either because we see a pattern that we consistently play that role, or we're actually aspiring to that role. So I would say that if you are feeling that tug, think about what holds you back. If you want to seek out that role of the visionary, what's holding you back? What are some of the blockages that exist, and how can you move through those? I think other reflection questions are about how can you effectively receive feedback and critique of your vision? How are you working with an ecosystem to advance your vision so it's not siloed? And then how are you navigating sort of your discomfort? Even if you are a visionary, oftentimes there are times when people feel a tremendous level of discomfort with stepping into that role. Like, is it my lane? Am I the right person? So how do you navigate that discomfort?
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think we've covered all of the main areas of what makes a visionary, how they can work with others. I'd love to invite some audience questions, or maybe see if there's some kind of visioning that we can do together. So if you have any visions for your community or for your social movement, or just for yourself in 2022, please feel free to share them. And we are happy to answer any other questions that come in.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea of asking people to think about what their visions are for a movement or a community that you're part of, or a cause that you're connected to. I know a lot of us, I think we talked about this last year, maybe Catherine, just on a personal level, like a lot of us do vision boarding, right? Where we actually build out a vision board for ourselves. So I really encourage folks to think about the movement or cause that you're connected to, especially at the end of the year. especially as we're thinking about supporting organizations. This is Giving Tuesday, right, today. And it launches sort of this time of thinking about how can we fulfill or support an organization's vision for the future. So even committing to an organization's vision for the future is a really good step to take. But yeah, would love to hear if folks have ideas for what is your vision of, as we said earlier, like an abolitionist future or a future of solidarity, of health and wellness. What does that look like for you?
Yeah. And if you're watching this later, you can put it into the comments too. If this series helped you, if you've been able to think about your role, your ecosystem more clearly. And if you liked this series, what more would you like to see in 2022? What about the social change map still intrigues you and you're interested in? So while we let that germinate, Deepa, I'll just ask you some questions as well. How do you feel now that we're at the end of the series?
I am actually like really, I'm so grateful that we were able to do this series. And I want to really thank you, Catherine, for, for kind of supporting this entire series from month to month. Could not have done it without you. I want to thank Kitty at BMP as well for supporting this series. And, I think it's been a great way for me even to like reach folks around the social change ecosystem framework, to be in conversation. We were able to talk to a lot of amazing folks on this series and learn from them, and to share kind of their wisdom and insights and the complexities of the roles that they play. So it's been a huge learning experience. And I think it's also built community. I think that, there are folks who come back to this time and again that I hear from, and really appreciate that, where folks are feeling connected to each other and to us through watching the series and participating in it. So, so those are some of the things that I'm reflecting on as we kind of close this out. But as you say, I'm really eager to know what folks want to see next year. Mm-hmm. And, we're really open to ideas at this point.
Yeah. And also, not to keep plugging this, but we do have all the recordings and all the follow-up materials saved as a guide. So if you go to our profile, if you're watching it later, you can look at all of these, all the past IG lives that we've done. And there's a question from Anna here. Deepa, I don't know if you see this question, but how do you assess your growth when you're leading into new roles? Thanks, Anna.
Yeah, thank you. And how can knowing each other's roles help in navigating conflict? That's a really good question. So that's one of the reasons that oftentimes I think it's good to use this framework if you're part of an ecosystem. Mm-hmm. So that could be your workplace. It could be a campus group. It could be a neighborhood volunteer mutual aid association, an online network. So any of those count as an ecosystem, right? And of course, we're talking about social change ecosystem. So there's some sort of goal or purpose of that ecosystem to do good in society, however they measure that and however they think about their society. So oftentimes it's great for that network or ecosystem to map out the roles of the folks involved. And when we do that, we can kind of get a sense of, oh, it looks like, in our organization, our campus group, we've got like 4 people who consider themselves builders, and we've got, no caregivers, and we've got like 6 frontline responders. And if you're able to map out like that, you'll draw your own conclusions, right? You'll say, oh, okay, so we've got a lot of people doing frontline work here who are on the ground responding to crisis, but we don't have any caregivers in our ecosystem who could perhaps provide the support for those frontline responders. So who among our staff or volunteers feels drawn to the caregiver role, and how can we support them to play that? Because that's such an important, critical role in the ecosystem that we're part of. So that's one way where when you map out an ecosystem, you can come up with some insights about how to diversify it, strengthen it, or experiment with different roles. And as Anna says, once you know sort of this is the role I'm playing in this ecosystem in this moment, and I know how others are showing up, it definitely helps, not just in so many ways into getting the work done, whatever you're working on, right? Because you're like, okay, this is my lane and I'm kind of the storyteller here in this part. And Catherine is playing the role of the disruptor. And I know this very clearly, right? So you kind of get to know that. But you also can navigate conflict better if you know kind of what roles folks are playing, because you can talk through, these are my strengths. I'm not sure if they're coming to the fore in the right way. And I feel like they might be butting up against maybe what you're doing. How do we kind of reconcile that? So it opens up I think with conflict, which is inevitable, oftentimes it's that first, when you first have to admit that there's conflict, that's the hardest part. And so maybe this framework can be a point of entry of saying, I know that these are the roles that we're playing, but maybe we're not doing them effectively. How can we talk through it?
Yeah, I really also like what you said about expectations, because like knowing what you're bringing to the table is really helpful. I think another practical example would be like knowing who's the ideas person, the visionary, and knowing who's the action person who can actually.
Yeah.
Exactly. I also want to lift up this note from Emily about birthing a new vision of change makers and community leaders so that they can rest, reimagine, realign, and reconnect with themselves. That's lovely. That's a nice vision.
Thank you so much, Emily. I feel like I've seen you on here before, and I am really curious to know how you're doing that, because it sounds great and probably something that we want to lift up at Building Movement Project in terms of the support for change makers and community leaders. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and before we close out, I just want to know, you may have kind of already answered this, but what are you thinking about as we head into 2022? I know you have a lot of visions.
I don't consider myself a visionary though, Catherine. I think that there are a couple of things that are on my mind. One of them is really about how we can strengthen and support social movements that are so important in this time, right? I mean, maybe more than ever, as we see the impact of division and polarization and chaos and conflict all around the world, and confusion. I think that we're all very drained, right? I don't speak for myself. I think, Catherine, we've talked about this. I mean, there's just this sense of feeling like exhausted and drained and confused and disoriented. And I think that this is when we need the vision of social movements to give us hope. That even in times of despair, times that are super challenging, I know I look to social movements a lot to kind of feel connected and also understand what is it that we're fighting for. So one of the things that really inspired me recently that folks might have read about or heard about is the farmers movement in India that's been going on for like over a year now. And they were fighting against these laws that would have restricted their rights in the industry. And so the government of India actually repealed those laws. And this is after a year of like constant rallying and advocacy and movement that the farmers led. And to me, like, that's an example of seeing a vision that came to reality, that came to pass. Not everything works like that, right? But it's been really inspiring. So as I look to 2022, it's all about what are the movements happening, whether they're in our neighborhoods, college campuses, our communities, our organizations, our networks. What are the movements that are in place? How can we best support them? Whether it's movement leaders like Emily talked about in her comment, whether it is around facilitating movements to work together more in solidarity, a lot of the work that we do at Building Movement Project, or even crafting narratives, right, where movements are connected to each other. So that's really my hope for kind of leaning into 2022, social movement vision and supporting the visions and visionaries of social movements. But as far as this concept or the framework goes, I know that we will continue at Building Movement Project to do trainings and workshops on the social change ecosystem framework. So reach out to us if you are part of an organization. Anna, I know, would really like me to tell you that all of our trainings and workshops are going to be happening in the second quarter of 2022. And so we hope you'll reach out to us so we can get everything scheduled and make sure we have some periods of rest in between our workshops and trainings. And you know, if you would like to continue seeing a series like this, please let us know in the comments, as Catherine said, or just reach out to us or DM us, because we are trying to figure out how to continue talking about the framework next year, but perhaps in a different way.
Yeah. And just to round out our conversation, I do want to point people back to the buildingmovement.org website so that you can sign up for our newsletter. As I mentioned, we're doing a series on how we're building power, building movements. Anna says April through June. But if you sign up for a newsletter, we also will be sending updates about, you know, if we're doing another series like this, or when we have new resources that are released. So definitely sign up for the newsletter.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being part of our community. We're so glad that we got to do this in 2021, and wish all of you rest and re-anchoring and renewal as we close out this difficult year and start a new one. And again, please reach out to us if we can be helpful in any way, and give us your feedback as well. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you for creating this. Thank you for doing this series. Thank you for planning with me.
Oh, it's been the best. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.